Shelley winner, return story, return story, Shelley winner.
There are some places in our lives we'd like to return to, and some places we never want to go again. I was invited to share my thoughts on the concept of return, a broad topic that I could apply to a variety of concepts. I considered places I had traveled both physically and spiritually. One place that I have visited again and again, and somehow I always feel incomplete unless I have plans to return, is the tiny country of Israel. I thought I would explore the experience of being at home in Israel and in Canada. The invitation to present was not a straightforward one. It was to participate in Pecha Kucha. Has anybody heard of Pecha Kucha? Oh, yay. Okay, awesome. I will share the story of the process of creation of the talk, the dramatic challenge of telling the story, and the presentation itself. Pecha Kucha is Japanese for chit chat, and it's the world's fastest growing storytelling platform used by millions around the globe. Pecha Kucha is what show and tell always dreamed of becoming. 20 slides, 20 seconds of commentary per slide. That's it. It's simple, it's engaging, and it spurs authentic connections. Pecha Kucha is the ideal tool to share passions and share knowledge. Global innovators use the Pecha Kucha platform to create powerfully, visually compelling stories that move audiences in less than 7 minutes. People share hilarious, heartwarming, tear-jerking Pecha Kucha presentations in bricks and mortar venues around the world, or at least they did before COVID. For example, there could be Pecha Kucha presentations in a community center, in a pub or bar, or online even. When I say people, it's really anyone with a message and something to say. You don't have to be a professional public speaker here. Pecha Kucha nights range from 50 people to 5,000, kind of like a TED Talk. Pecha Kucha began because people talk too much. In 2003, yearning for more show and less tell, architects Astrid Klein and Mark Ditham of Tokyo's Klein Ditham Architecture invented Pecha Kucha. The initial purpose was to streamline long design presentations. As a designer myself, I can completely relate to this. If you have your clients in a room and you're trying to present a design concept, a lofty idea of what they can envision for their space, and you talk too much, you can lose your clients. Really, it is true that a picture tells 1,000 tales, and Pecha Kucha emphasizes imagery as well as text, but keeps it to a minimum. Sessions soon morphed into happenings, Pecha Kucha nights, first in Tokyo, then around the world. Today, more than 50,000 people present at over 1,000 global Pecha Kucha nights every year, and the number keeps exploding. Today, schools and businesses use Pecha Kucha to creatively and effectively engage students and employees on a range of subject matters. I decided that rather than present a straightforward talk, I would present mine in rhyme, a poem that would express the actual journeys I have taken to Israel and the thoughts and feelings that I experienced in the comings and goings. I was exposed to the American poet Amanda Gorman through watching the inauguration of President Joe Biden. Did anybody see that? So people have a little bit, have seen. She was selected to read her original poem, The Hill We Climb, for his inauguration on January 20th, 2021. She was 22 years old, in making her the youngest poet to have served in this role. Her poem, The Hill We Climb, moved me both emotionally and intellectually. The structure, the style, the flow, all connected to form a single song of hope. Importantly, she also used body language and gestures, as we do in Toastmasters, to reinforce her message. She actually showed a hill and used her hand gestures to beautifully fuse the actions and the words. If you have not seen it, go to YouTube and search Amanda Gorman inauguration. She will captivate you as she did me. Now a bit about Amanda. She was born in Los Angeles, California. She was raised by her single mother, Joan Wicks, a sixth grade English teacher in the neighborhood of Watts, LA, with her two siblings. Her twin sister, Gabrielle, is an activist and a filmmaker. Gorman has said she grew up in an environment with limited television access. So if you're thinking of a reason to tell your kids to stop watching TV, they can become like Amanda Gorman. She has described her young self as a weird child who played with books and reading and writing and was encouraged by her mother. She graduated from Harvard University in 2020. Gorman was named the first ever National Poet Laureate of the United States. She previously served as the Youth Poet Laureate of Los Angeles, and she is the founder and executive director of One Pen, One Page, an organization providing free creative writing programs for underserved youth. That's something for Irma to contemplate, that someday she'll do a poetry program as a writer that she is. Gorman's art and activism focused on issues of oppression, feminism, race, and marginalization, as well as the African diaspora. She has said she was inspired to become a youth delegate for the United Nations in 2013 after watching a speech by Pakistani Nobel Prize laureate Malala Yousafzai, who you may have heard of as well. Gorman was chosen as the first Youth Poet Laureate of Los Angeles in 2014. In 2014, it was reported that Gorman was editing the first draft of the novel that the 16-year-old had been writing over the last 2 years. She published her poetry book, The One for Whom Food is Not Enough, in 2015. My hope, she said, is that my poem will represent a moment of unity for our country, and with my words, I'll be able to speak to a new chapter and era for our nation. About the hill we climb, she said, but what I really aspire to do in the poem is to be able to use my words to envision a way in which our country can still come together and still heal. I will now read a small selection from the poem. This is the era of just redemption we feared at its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So while we once asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail upon us? Notice that the rhymes occur not just at the end of the sentence, but within the sentence as well. She says, to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. The other important challenge for me is that the story needed to have a dramatic arc, so that while I could begin at the beginning in my youth, at some point I needed to come to a place of tension as I confront an unpleasant experience. This is the climax of the story, and from this point there are the lessons learned leading to the final revelation. The story I tell begins when I'm a young girl in Hebrew school in Winnipeg, and I'm shown a photograph of Tel Aviv, Israel, that enchanted me. This is the story in the poem. It was an evening photo of Tel Aviv, and Tel Aviv is a major city in Israel full of liveliness and energy. My story continues throughout my teenage years when my family moved to Israel for a year to experience life in this country. I returned again and again during my university years, traveling the country from the north to the south and working on a kibbutz, which is an agricultural settlement and where people live communally together. From there, I tell the story, which moves to my adult years when I returned to Israel as part of what is called a mission, which means it's a group tour. I found that experience to be negative, as it was an intellectual examination of the country that I am so passionate about. From there, I realized perhaps as a tourist, I was taking rather than giving. And in my travels, I searched for a new way to contribute to the country. I'm now going to share my screen and present my Pecha Kucha, hoping with all of my heart that the technology works. When I go into this share screen, the presentation should begin and it should start moving at 20 seconds per slide. And if it doesn't, we're going to do what we say in the business as a do-over. I was a young girl in Hebrew school, and the teacher brought a photo, an image that was magical. Around about at night in Tel Aviv, it was fantastical. And I dreamed of this place where Jewish people landed and took a stand there, ashes rising, reprising biblical grandeur. At 15, my family moved to Herzliya. I grew up by the sea, teenagers in the sticky sun, hot with humidity. I never knew I'd come to know a home where my heart would feel alive and be moved to return there, a lifelong worn path that would begin and would end there. The trees formed a bower, lush leaves a canopy. My senses engaged, trying things I'd never seen. I realized the world was bigger than my home on the prairie. We came back to Winnipeg after only 1 year, a sabbatical. My father said making a living there was too hard. It just wasn't practical. Then I returned. In my 20s, I traveled, unraveled the corners of the land, sleeping on beaches bedraggled, hitchhiking from the north, a green land to the south, the heat and the sand, the pull of history, the pull of university. I came back for my degree, a 4-year span. I returned to explore in deeper depth and to learn Jerusalem's sacred stones, the stories embedded in hills that burn, with the sun-soaked ramparts that I climbed, with the 4 quarters to see, Islamic, Armenian, Jewish, and Christianity. If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, a promise to keep, asleep in the soul of the dreamers who weep. Through the ages, a time, a prayer that time cannot delete. Golden and hazy, the patterns, the glittering domes. With prayer and hope, after the summer, again I went home. In only 1 year, I returned, a kibbutznik I had become, and riding the tractor, eating together, making green growth in the sand. Early days rising, striving, working the land. Kibbutz Kerem Shalom, arise on the desert and a communal life. Can I do it? Yes, I can. The mango trees laden with fruit that would lie on the ground rotting unless it was tied. My job was to connect the branches back up with twine. Then the fruit could be exported still in its prime. Hours upon hours until the tractor arrived. Happy days filled with purpose and feeling alive. I could see the striped colors of dune after dune. Ochre and gold told vivid stories of ancient ruins, the melodies, the harmonies, the Middle Eastern tunes. I always sensed I played a part somehow in this history. It felt like I had been there before. The ancient call felt just like a memory. Even so, I came back to Canada and ordinary life. I became a worker, a mother, a volunteer, and a wife. Remembering the culture of the country I explored, feeling there was time yet to learn something more, waiting for the right time to open the door. And I returned on an organized mission with political ends, with those who studied analytical trends. back to the markets with colors to see, but it was a different kind of visit for me. Traveling with 200 people, I didn't make friends. It was disconnecting, dissecting, to be dispassionate, and to pretend that I could examine without passion and pain, pass judgment on the place, and try to refrain. The textures, the lectures, not stressing the glory, although I still yearned to be a part of the story. I came back to Canada feeling deflated and feeling sorry. I returned. After 25 years, it finally was time. I missed the spice towers, the herb flowers, to revisit in my prime, to not take, but to give back, a new track, giving at last, to show dedication, resolve, and camaraderie. Go back to the place that I felt that I ought to be. I signed up for the Army. I went for 3 weeks to the Israel Defense Forces. SAR-L is a program they have for visitors, and of course is right up my alley, where I could get to live among the soldiers, shoulder to shoulder, volunteer, become a peer, lend a hand, and to give. To invest in a real way to show the young kids they're not alone, that we know of their struggles far away in our foreign homes. I wasn't assigned any dangerous tasks, checking the kit bags and putting them back, each one an allotment of equipment to store in case the reservists are called up in a war. We sorted and counted and pushed on through the dust. The warehouse is bloated, coated, we must ensure that the helmets and vests stained with blood were deleted, kept on counting until the day's job was completed. So many stains, so many tears, we felt defeated. The barracks were bleak and the facilities expired, the dining halls packed with young faces so tired. The crowded aisles would part as we appeared. They were grateful, respectful of us volunteers, so happy we had come. They thanked us with tears. It was not just to be there and lend what help I could, but to come back and report that their mission is good. We are defenders, not murderers, they came and told me, concerned that I take their message to heart and boldly return to Canada and work to tell people their true story. Return to Canada and spread their story with fresh eyes. They worry that all that is said about them is lies. I promise to be a good ambassador, tell the story of the struggle, and that's my promise, my turn, a journey that has taken me 10 visits to learn. When it ended, I felt something had changed on the inside. A longing was gone. I can finally confide. It seems I have made peace with my faraway home. I honored my dream, but in time I have learned that I don't always have to go back in order to return. Pecha Kucha is a format that is tightly structured, 20 slides for 20 seconds. Fitting my story within the guidelines was a challenge. First, I had to find the photos to support the ideas, then craft the photo to fit within the timing. I was inspired by the brilliant young Amanda Gorman to tell my story with word pictures so as to create impact and powerful imagery. The hard part was to create the rhymes. I started with the ending. I knew that the important thing was the end rhyme, so each sentence needed an ending rhyme to be followed by a second sentence that would go with it. Then I could fill in the rest. As an example, I said, if I forget thee, O Jerusalem, a promise to keep, asleep in the souls of the dreamers who weep. So that became 3 rhymes in 1 sentence. The ending was planned from the beginning. The lesson learned was a twist, that I don't have to go back in order to return. Many of us have ambitions to return to a place that is meaningful for us, and each one of us needs to struggle in terms of the story. Do we have to go back in reality, or is it enough for us to go back in our memory? The challenge is for the listener to ponder the concept of physical location versus an imaginary connection, and is the fundamental expression of return as a reality or as an ideal. My story began with the challenge to speak on the concept of return within the format of Pecha Kucha, 20 slides, 20 seconds. My decision to present it in rhyme was a challenge, but I drew inspiration from Amanda Gorman, the brilliant young poet. I challenge you to try a poetry format. It's fun, brings a new element of rhyme and rhythm to your message. If I can do it, so can you. Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you, Shirley. Wow, that was adroitly delivered. Beautiful.